You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks and Zach Bechtold. We hope you enjoy this week's show, and you can find out more about us by going online at beardedtheologians.com, where you can pick up a few t-shirts, listen to a few old episodes, and find ways that you can connect with us. Thank you for listening. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
So this week on the podcast, we're looking at the lectionary text for Thanksgiving. And the particular text that we're looking at is the Hebrew Bible text, Joel 2:21 through 27. So Zach, as you do your thing with that, let's get going.
I like that. I just read it. That's all. So Joel 22:21 through 27, hear these words. Don't fear, fertile land, rejoice and be glad, for the Lord is about to do great things. Don't be afraid, animals of the field, for the meadows of the wilderness will turn green. The tree will bear its fruit. The fig tree and the grapevine will give their full yield. Children of Zion, rejoice and be glad in the Lord your God, because he will give you the early rain as a sign of righteousness. He will pour down abundant rain for you, and the early and late rain as before. The threshing floors will be full of grain, and the vats will overflow with new wine and fresh oil. I will repay you for the years that the cutting locust, the swarming locust, and the hopping locust, and the devouring locust have eaten. My great army, which I sent against you, you will eat abundantly and be satisfied, and you will praise the name of the Lord your God, who has done wonders for you. And you will know that I am Lord in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God, no other exists. Never again will my people be put to shame. And so, Matt, as you hear that that section from Joel, what does it do for you?
I know how prophets work, and it's the idea of the hope of
Right.
and yet to come. And I think it's a recognition of how God is like, all right, Jerusalem, I did all these bad things because you weren't faithful, and now like everything's okay. Have thanks for it. But I also think too, like the opening line that Joel uses is "Do not fear." Um, I think, and right now, with all that's going on in the world and the fear that is crippling the world, I think just those three words are very important for us right now, with the hope of what is to come. There's power in the not yet. And obviously, the author here is really hoping for that restoration to occur, and maybe it has by the time that this is all said and done. Um, but I really do believe that like that idea of do not fear, but then also have thanks for God, that God does care for us, that God does provide for us. I think that that's a really important thing to lean into, but then also just really, I think, especially with all that's gone on in our world lately, having no fear is really key to not cripple us as a
Mhm.
people. What
Yeah,
about you?
and that's what we find with our prophets, right? Whether they be the major or minor ones, anytime a prophet shows up throughout Scripture, it's because things aren't going well. The Israelites aren't doing great. They're often, well, not often, always, when a prophet shows up, they're not following God. They're not living into their covenant. And so God sends a prophet to speak up and be like, hey, Israel, remember remember what you and God had, remember the things God has called you to do and to follow and how to be in relationship with God. You're not doing that. So uh, stuff's gonna happen. Things are going to continue to be bad. Often those things that continue to be bad revolve around famine, and war, right? Like when the Israelites turn away from God, either food dries up or they're invaded by someone and enslaved. And that's what I think that's what we see in this quick little section in Joel is the restoration of that, of God's people coming turning back to God and the restoration and reconciliation and the covenant that there is of God will provide. You've gone through these things because you've turned away, and now that you've turned back, don't fear. This is where your hope comes from. And as you searched for hope in other places and other things and other gods, this is where your hope comes from. And don't forget that. I think that last line, after the promise, right? Like the first of the whole thing is here's the promise. Your land will be fertile. You'll have food. You'll have oil. You'll have all these things. You won't have to worry. The rains will come. And in verse 27, you will know that I am in the midst of Israel and that I am the Lord your God. No other exists. Never again will my people be put to shame. That's really kind of what sticks out to me. Even if we read on verse 28, I feel is profound in this narrative. After that, I will pour out my spirit upon everyone. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams, and the young men will see visions. And just that relationship and the covenant that God has with God's people, you'll know that I am here. My presence will be felt. My spirit will pour out, and you then will go back out into the world and do the things. Continue to share my love and grace. Continue to be, you'll prophesy. You'll have dreams. You'll see visions. You'll know that I am there again. And I think you're right. I think that lends into that idea of don't fear, don't be afraid. There's a lot of things, regardless of timing, we have to be afraid of. But knowing that God is with us, and among us is hopeful.
Which has really helped me lean into. I'm glad I didn't print the bulletin yet because I think I'm going to read through and read through the rest of the chapter because there's that idea of not to fear, but then to allow the space for those things to occur. Allow
Yeah.
your sons and daughters to prophesy. Allow the old men to dream dreams. Like and allow the young men to see visions. I think there's some health in that
Mhm.
that can stir up some really good sense of conversation. If you were to use this for the Christ the King Sunday, or if you do a Thanksgiving service, there's some hope in that, especially with the way uh, that you jump back to the very beginning of not fearing. How do you not fear? You look forward.
Mhm.
Like I think sometimes we find ourselves in the midst of fear of things in the past, but not
Mhm.
things to come. But where we allow our past to dictate our future fears, meaning that like we see things and like, oh well, this is what could happen, and
Mhm.
that's what cripples us. Whereas if we look towards the future with hope and think, hey, like one, God's got our back. The other is like we're it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this together. There's some hope in that leads us really well into the Advent season, but yet also can, as we're having to deal with all that's going on in our world, I think it helps ground us a little bit on where our focus should be and
Mhm.
whom we should really be leaning into. And really, it's God. I mean, I think sometimes we forget how easy it really is. It's really God that's going to help us through this. And
Mhm.
I talked about last week reading Psalm 16 in my sermon about where does our refuge come from? Where do
Mhm.
we seek refuge? And really wrestle with that. Are you seeking refuge from God or other things? And here the author is really clear, like, y'all are with me, and so here's what I'm gonna do for you. Um, and I think that that's one of the things that as my camera is going like crazy because I literally moved my hand. Um, new camera, new things. I think that that's something we can lean into.
Yeah. I have focused a lot on the last week we answered, we didn't answer, arguably, or admittedly, so we didn't answer why bad things happen to good people, or just why bad things happen in general, and using Job and finding hope in the uncomfortable action of sitting in the ashes. I think that speaks to this of don't be afraid. Um, we're gonna have to sit in the ashes sometimes. We're gonna have to sit in the times of famine and in drought and uh just not having a good time. And it's how we show up for one another and with one another in those hopeless moments, how we're community together, how we sit in the ashes together that brings us hope into the future and leaning into the promise that is before us, right? And not letting fear of what we know can and has happened overcome us with what hasn't yet happened, right? I think I know as I know I've said it a lot in ministry and regrettably so. We've tried that before somewhere else and it won't work. That's so damning. To be like, we tried it over there and it didn't work, or we've had this experience and it was this, and therefore that's what it's going to be here today if we try it or venture towards it. Just that stuckness of yeah, dang it. We failed here and we can't try it again or whatever. Or we're afraid to do it because of some past experience. I think you're right. I don't think that lets the spirit breathe life into us and move us into new directions and yeah, let's fear sink in.
Well, and I think if you can tell where people are depending on are they letting love be their guide or are they letting fear be their guide? And I think
Mm,
that that's something we should wrestle with, especially as we think about, some of you will be going back to be with family during this season of Thanksgiving and Christmas. And, I know sometimes that can be hard and awkward, but how can you let love be your guide in those spaces and not let the fear or, um, not to be put yourself in a place where like it can be awkward, but maybe just speak love in those spaces and just say, understand that there are some people that you just can't. Um, it's not you. It's not up to you to change them. It's you to show them what love looks like.
yeah. And just showing up in that space, right? Like you look at the prophets, they don't have fun messages. Nobody's excited a prophet shows up, right?
Well,
Um,
they definitely don't have avoidance issues. So,
well,
uh,
I don't know. Some of them do. It takes them a
well,
while to get there, but
they do, but they don't.
you're right.
They eventually man up and
But
and
it,
and get there.
but
So,
if you, as we read through all of their stories, their messages are tough to hear, but they're done in love, right? Like
yeah,
they are sent in love by God that say hard things, and hard things aren't always easy to hear, but when they're done in love, that we see that change in the Israelites. We see that change in God's people of them turning back once they lean into this is a loving message from God. It's just hard to hear because we're not in the right place.
right. So Zach, where have you seen God at work in your
Um,
life?
this is one of those weeks that I don't know yet. Not because God's not working and moving, but I've been so daggum busy. I haven't had a minute to see and take a breath and ask myself that question. So all over the place, but I don't know. I don't have a tangible this week.
And and there's nothing wrong with that. I think uh to be able to acknowledge that is really what we should be doing anyway, is that there are times where we just don't, and that's okay too. And then there are times where we do have things, and that's okay. I was last week, you're this week, and we're okay. There'll
Yeah,
be a week where we actually both are in sync on that, and it will happen.
it will be the
Um,
week of Christmas.
yeah, well, that's when we're brain dead and we're just like we're
Correct.
zombies. I think for me, it's been really fun to see how the Spirit's been working in this place. And it's helped lead us through some difficult conversations, but it's also helped lead us to what is the hope of what is to come. And there's been some excitement around that. And I've just really enjoyed that and being in the midst of that. And then just, I don't know about you, but like this year I felt the most excited about an Advent in a very long time. And I don't know, there's something about it that's really getting me excited this year. And I don't know what it is. Like I talked about this last night with a group of people, and I was like, I don't know what it is, but I'm like super excited about Advent this year. And it's been a long time since I felt these feelings. So I'm really, really, really excited and looking forward to what's to come. So,
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. I'm excited about Advent partly because I'm doing it differently this year.
Yeah,
Just talking about some different stories and uh, trying to, at least for me, renew my spirit of Advent in a different way.
cool.
I like it.
So we want to thank our listeners for listening. We want to thank all those that have bought items on the website. We've actually like tripled
Yeah.
in sales this year.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, thank you.
Two to
Like
six. Two to
two to
six.
six
Let's be
is a
clear.
really big deal. And really, it went from one in 2019 to two in 2021 to six in 2024. So that's really good exponential growth. And so we thank our listeners for doing that. Don't forget that with this season of Hallowthankmas High Holy season, those gifts make good gifts for people that you know that would be bearded theologians, or an amazing white elephant gift because maybe people don't understand what you're gifting, and that's fine too. But we want to thank our listeners for listening. Don't forget to share and like us across your spaces. And we enjoy the conversations that you share with us. And so for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
I want you to subscribe and like this video and push that thumbs up.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.